My name is Jimmy Reyes, and I'm a professional comic book illustrator. Welcome to my channel, where I share tips, techniques, and an inside look at being a freelance illustrator. Alright, in the previous video, I showed the basics on how to start using the 102 Crow Quill. Things like how to load ink on there, how much ink, how to prep it, things such as that. You know, if you're just starting out, first time using a 102 Crow Quill, I'd suggest watching that video first. It's a video on the 102 basics. So I thought I would go through and ink some more over this artwork here by artist Jimmy Lee, and I would do a live demo to give you guys an idea of what I do and how I approach inking a page. So what you want to do when you first start inking a page is you want to you want to absorb all the detail. You want to look at the artwork, step back for a minute. Don't just rush into inking your page. Step back for a minute, look at the artwork as a whole, try to get an idea of what the artist has intended, and try to envision what the finished piece is supposed to look like. Because each penciler has their own style, and you do want to stay true to their style. You don't want to over render, you don't want to dominate the artwork, you want to complement it, you want to harmonize with it. So by taking a minute, step back, look at all the artwork, look at the detail, and then create the plan inside your mind. You sit back and you imagine it in your mind's eye, and then your hand just reacts like a printer. It just prints out that image that you've already created within your imagination. All right, so I'm gonna clean up my nib. In the previous video, I do show how I clean my nibs using the scrap piece of denim. All right, so I like to start in an area where I feel most confident. This way, I build up my confidence and get my rhythm going. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of creating, I want a thick line here, and then I want it to go really thin. So I'm actually creating holding lines on the side, and then just filling it in. It's actually not all done in one stroke. With the nib, you really have to construct your lines and build them. With a brush, you may be able to actually be able to create those lines, and you may ask, then why not use a brush? Wouldn't a brush be faster? Yes, it would, but with the Crow Quill, for this particular style, it gives me a bit more of a crisp line, and it's really it's a bit more work, but it gives me the end result that I'm looking for. And so that's why I'm actually sticking with the 102 Crow Quill rather than just a brush. So there's a lot of folds within her arm here, and so I really don't want to ink it all in one stroke. I want to break the lines because to kind of help enhance the folds and show that they're not connecting, they're overlapping each other. At least that's what I'm attempting to do, and so hopefully it comes across that way. And so, as I mentioned before, if you have watched the previous video on how to ink with a Crow Quill, 102 Crow Quill, that we throw lines pretty much the same line over and over, but it's how you rotate the page and what angle you use these lines to construct the illustration. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm actually rotating the page and then throwing the line towards my body, because that's where I'm most comfortable. And each inker is different. There are many inkers out there that will throw the line away from their body, and there's a few of us that actually throw it towards our body. I do throw it towards my body, but if you may or may not have noticed that I actually hold the nib at a bit of an angle, and I kind of throw my line really more diagonally than I do down towards my body. And that's just what I've become comfortable with. It's easier for me to control my line that way. So everyone's going to be different, it just depends on which hand motion works best for you. So as I mentioned before, that this video here is going to be an inking demo, and so the idea that I have behind this video is to actually, share my thoughts, think out loud. A lot of times this stuff just happens instantly in my brain, and it's natural. A lot of it becomes second nature to me. So I'm not used to talking out loud as I'm inking. A lot of times I'm just listening to music, or I have a video playing in the background while I'm inking. So I'm going to try to mention everything that's going through my brain as I am placing my line down. All right, so I'm going to dip my nib into my ink jar, and then I want to continue on with these outlines here, outlining her jacket. And a lot of these lines I'm actually constructing, and right here I see the lines a little thicker, so I kind of create a little bit of an angle, and then it bends back in, and I see a little line here, and I think it'd be neat to just have these type of lines in here that if I ink it in all one outline around her body, then it tends to look more like a coloring book, and it will lose its energy. Jim Lee has drawn this very quickly, and it has a lot of energy in it with some of these sketch lines that he's got in here, some of his loose lines. So for me, I think if you keep that, you can retain the energy by giving it a bit of a sketch look or an organic look. This way it doesn't look too mechanical and too stiff. So I keep some of those in there. So in order to get different weight variations, you do use pressure. And so what I do is I will lighten up. I have a very light hand when I'm inking, and I just hover right over the paper and just throw that line. And the type of ink that I'm using is Coimc. It's a universal ink. It's the same ink used in repeatograph technical pens, and I like it because I like how solid black it dries. And it was also what was recommended from the guys that taught me how to ink, that were part of Wildstorm, which was a part of Image back in the day, and now it's been absorbed by DC Comics. And that's the type of ink that they use, type of ink Scott William uses. Sandra Hope uses the same ink, and so I believe they use the Ultra Draw, but I buy the universal one because it's a little cheaper, and you can get it in a larger quantity, but it's basically the same ink. So what I do is I do take a break, and I look at the artwork, and I sit back and think, okay, while the nib is giving me this particular type of lines, it's giving me the ability to ink these thicker lines, where else is there a thick line that I want to ink? And I rotate the page. You also want to be conscious of where you've just finished inking. You want to not forget that the ink may be wet over here. And the good thing about the repeatograph ink, with it drying fairly quickly, and it allows you to work faster on the page because it'll dry, and you can then rotate the page. Even if you put your hand on it, you're not going to smear it. The downside to that is that it'll dry in your nib. As long as you keep your nib clean, you keep wiping it, and you shouldn't have any problem with the ink flowing. So right here, I'm going to throw a quick line, and I threw this line where it'll meet up near the tip, giving me a really fine point and a wide base. So I actually sculpted that right there. And anytime the areas that are in shadow, away from light, those lines are going to be thicker. A lot of pencilers, especially like Jim Lee, is a veteran, they do that. They will actually place the line weights within their pencils because it's it's something they've already learned how to do, and it's just part of their artwork. But I wouldn't always rely on the penciler, because the penciler's working on a deadline, and they're really just trying to get all the artwork done as a whole, making sure that it all works together. And it's really our job to add depth and make sure that we are actually adding the proper line weights. It's what we were hired for. So we just keep an eye out. So I'm sculpting this line here, right behind her. It's back part of her jacket. And then here's a thick line. Looks like it's casting shadow underneath her armpit. So that's going to be a thicker line. And the thing that I'm thinking of right now in my head is, do I want to ink it solid black, or do I want to ink it with several little lines? Because that's the way Jim Lee's pencils are right here. You can see some lines within there. So I'm thinking I'm going to do both. I'm going to make this solid black and maybe add just a couple of lines to kind of almost like a gradient to fade out of that little black shadow he's got going on there on her jacket. So when I threw my line there, I actually threw the line with a curve. You know, you want to keep in mind the shape of the object that you're inking. You don't want to flatten it out and always throw a straight line. You want to be able to control your line. So you really want to practice on how to throw the line, because you want to throw it at the right angle and you want to throw it at the right length. You don't want to, throw that line too far. Then, you're going to cross over into other areas of the artwork. And that just comes with practice and with time. And after a while, it just happens. You just know how to do it. So I'm looking for more little areas with the same kind of angular look, and little places that have darker shadows and stuff, that while I'm feeling that rhythm right now, feeling that confident with these outlines, so I'm going to do that first. And really what I'm doing is, if you've haven't noticed yet, as I mentioned a few times, is that I'm creating these outlines. I'm actually sculpting these lines. They're not actually laid down all in one stroke with pressure. This allows me to control the lines and make them crisp and angular. It's the style that I've developed for my own style of inking, which is funny because when I started inking, I didn't think I had a style. And then once I started inking Dave Finch, people started mentioning to me that, my style is a bit organic. And Brett Booth, if you've seen me ink his work before, he really likes my inks over his pencils. And I've kind of created a kind of a hybrid of organic inking and clean inking together over his work. It took me a little while to figure out how I was going to approach and ink his style, because it's different than Dave Finch's style. So it's the same thing here with Jim Lee. It's sometimes for an inker it takes a little while to figure out the best way to ink a penciler. And I think this is my third or fourth time inking a sample of Jim Lee's work. That I think at this point I would be confident to ink his work, actual ink it, So I threw a couple of lines here together really close. And what I'm doing is I'm going to create a gradient of fade out of black. She's got some black highlights or black shadows here, and so I want to make a gradient, make them fade out, because the way that we blend solid black to grays and create gray tones is by line art, because we don't have different shades of gray. It's not an ink wash. It's as I mentioned, all done with line art. So you have to be able to create that using different line weights and how you place them and how you create this gradient effect. And so I want to create some lines in there and not make it all solid black. I just think that makes it look a little more detailed, and it makes it, it keeps the energy. It retains a little bit of a roughness to the illustration. And so if you have not seen the previous video before, I show how I clean my nib. And I also show how I have a scrap piece of Bristol board that I'll test my ink on the nib and test the nib before I actually go on to the actual artwork. And so that's something that's happening here to my right off camera. So I want to ink this little area, and I'm gonna create some cool little shapes here. That I just think, you know, make little highlights, and it makes it really cool. All right, so right here, when I ink this piece, it's all done without any weight, different weight pressures. It's all just the same, keeping the same weight on my hand over the paper so that that line comes out flat. There are some times I do want a flat line, and make little notations. This is all going to be in black. This will all be in black. So I make little X's and stuff there. Just little notations when I go back in with the brush. And I fill those in. Because if I try to fill in a large black area with my 102 nib, eventually I start to pick up the fibers into the nib. And then it will keep the nib open and more ink flows out. So I'm trying to keep the life of this nib as long as I can. I'm trying to keep the fibers out so I can, you know, stay in rhythm and keep working at this pace. So right here is her glove. She does have her sleeve that is overlapping the glove, so this line is going to be thicker. And keeping those angular style of lines, just because that's just the way I like inking. And I'm going to throw this line and then kind of create a little bit of a triangle right near the middle of it, just because it kind of helps the fold in there. I'm going to go light to more pressure here, real light pressure, so that the base closest to me is heavier in weight and thicker. So I've got a line here. I can either throw this line thicker to thin that way, or do light thin to more pressure and ink that thicker. So just because of the position that I have the paper in, I want to throw it like that and create the base out here just a little wider. You know, so when you're inking, you do want to use your imagination. You know, you are an artist yourself. You know, even though you're not penciling the creation of this page, you know, you're not the first artist on it, but you are the second artist on it, and so your job is to continue using, you know, the imagination and help this illustration along. You're just working in a different medium, you know, and it's different. You know, I mean, it is a technical job, but it's you know, it's different. You're not worrying about pacing of the story. You're not worrying about camera angles. You know, you're actually working on line art. So you want to always be conscious of the line art and making sure that you are helping the shapes, the shadows, you know, that you are adding textures. You don't want to take away from the illustration. You do want to retain, you know, the quality. You do add a little bit to the art. You don't want to overpower and add too much. You know, you don't want to change the illustration. You know, there are a few inkers whose work, you know right away that they touch the artwork because their style is so dominant. I think, you know, it's best to be more of like a ghost on it, you know, where people really don't even know what you've done, you know, to the artwork. You know, they just know it's good artwork. I think those are the best inkers. So if they give all the credit to the penciler for beautiful line work, then that's really a compliment to you. You know, you should be proud that they're doing that. So I rotate the image because I had it up, you know, I had it sideways, and so I rotated it, looking at it again. Take a quick minute to just look at the artwork and think, okay, based on how the nib is working for me right now, are there any other lines that I would feel comfortable touching on that are all within that same style? So I like this, the little, I don't know what these would be called in this part of the suit, and it's kind of like a space suit, and it seems to have these indentions in it, I guess, that allows it to be very flexible and move. I like that, and I think I want to double those lines. Just looking at them here, I think, you know, if I throw a couple of lines there and double them up, I think it would make that piece of the armor there look a bit beveled, and look that it has you know, multi layers, and it looks, you know, create the illusion of that flexibility in the suit. So let me try that, and maybe it'll make more sense when I start putting the ink down. So I'm dipping my ink, testing it on the scrap piece of paper, and then I'm gonna create a wide base. I'm gonna throw my line light, and then over here I'm gonna go light to thicker. I'm creating that, but I'm gonna double that line right there. I think that works. Create a double line. And the top one just a little thicker. Just to kind of create, you know, the depth and a little edge on it there. All right, so behind her neck, it's a little thicker near where her neck meets her choker, and so I went ahead and inked that line separate, and I kept this part here its own little line, and then I did this separate so that when I throw the lines, it doesn't all look like it's connected. It looks like, you know, her neck isn't connected to the choker or the jacket. It kind of helps create the depth there. She's got these lines, a little shadow underneath her jaw. So I think it'd be cool to just ink some of those right now. One thing that's great is when you do ink over the original pencils, that you can see the underdrawings. You can see the different shades of gray that the penciler, you know, made by the amount of pressure he placed on his pencils. When you're inking over blue line like this, it really, you really don't get to see all that, because the blue line all blends in together in one shade of blue. So you kind of lose some of that underdrawing that you really would use to help construct, you know, or the line work that was used to construct the illustration. You use it to finish the illustration. You use it to keep the shapes, and you kind of get to see what the penciler was thinking as he was working on it. And so for me, I find it very helpful that, you know, to be able to have that, but unfortunately we don't have that with this blue line. So little things may get lost in there. So we try to use your imagination, you know, try to really study the artwork if you're looking at a blue line version of it. All right, so I just kind of feel like inking the top of her hair here. You know, some inkers, want to ink certain parts of the illustration, and then we'll then move around the page, you know, at certain points, mostly because they're waiting for the ink to dry, or it's just how they've become comfortable working with it. But for me, I skip around a lot. I jump around different places. It just depends. There's really no method to the insanity. You know, it's just what I do. I just like to jump around the page based on what the nib's giving me or where my confidence is at that time. Or I look for little areas and go, oh, this looks like a fun little line I could throw here, and I could do this or that. So with Harley Quinn's hair, I'm not going to ink it in all in one line weight. You know, it's going to have different multi-layers and stuff, but I am keeping the lines around her a little thicker just to make her pop out in front of some of these other background characters that are here. I don't want her to blend in too much into the image. I want the eye to be able to focus, you know, the prominent character is Harley Quinn, and it looks like Deadshot as well. So I want to make sure that they're, you know, what the eye will focus on first are the prominent characters. It seems to be those two, you know, and then the background characters are really just, you know, that's what they are. They're background characters, just kind of filling in space, but they are also important, but they're secondary. So I'm really going to focus on these two and make their outlines thicker than the back. So I want to ink them first, so that when I ink the characters in the background, I just ink them thinner, and you know, that way, because I mean, it is, you can ink the background and then ink the foreground second, and you can build the lines up from there. But I tend to like to ink the foreground first and then try to ink the background just a little thinner. And then if I have to come back and thicken up some areas, then I'll go back and thicken it up. And that's just, you know, the way I work, and so it's really up to you on what part of the artwork you want to work on. And, you know, so there is a bit of a planning going into it. It's not just, you know, jumping in and just see what happens. You know, I am conscious of, you know, everything that's on the artwork and what needs to really pop, and a lot of that, as I mentioned, just kind of happens in my brain automatically. You know, it happens so fast, you know, that you know, I really, this is the first time I've ever had to articulate what is going on in my brain as I'm working, and I thought that would be make a neat video. So I'm going to continue on inking her hair. This part here, I want it to meet right there. And I want this to blend in here a little thicker and then thin. And my favorite thing is when I ink hair, I really like inking it with a brush. That's really, you know, brush gives me a quick soft line. So that's just my preference. But for the outline here, you know, nib's okay. And the great thing about a nib is that you can throw a line and it will be halfway along the illustration, then you can finish that line and throw the rest of it. And finishing that line with the nib, and it actually all looks like one stroke because the tip of the nib is so fine that it allows you to connect the two parts together, and that's what allows me to construct my lines, is the really fine point of the tip of the nib. And you always want to keep in mind that the part of the nib where the ink well is, that's the direction that you're going to throw your line. So if the ink well is underneath like this, you're going to throw your line that way. You know, you really pretty limited in the direction that you have to throw the nib. You know, you always have to have that ink well facing the direction that you're throwing it, whether it's, you know, away from your body or towards your body. or in my case, I throw it sideways. So I also try to keep in mind, like right here, Jim Lee has broken the line. You know, he didn't make the line go all the way up to her glove, you know, as far as the part on the of her jacket here on her forearm. It isn't going all the way up to the glove and connecting. He did that because the light is just touching very lightly up there, and it created a highlight, so the line appears to be broken. So you want to, you know, keep in mind and keep that. And then right here you have the bottom of her breast, which is in front of that forearm. So you want to ink this part of it thicker than what I just inked that, at least slightly. And that should help separate the two objects. So I went ahead and I inked this forearm first, so then I can ink the bottom here of her breast a little thicker, and do it all in one time, and I have to go back and build it back up. So let's dip the nib into more ink. I'm gonna test my nib on my scrap piece of Bristol board. And right here, I think to help keep the shape of her breast is that the light's gonna hit near the top, because it, you know, it's protruding forward and it's curved, so the base of the shape is going to be thicker and darker, and Jim Lee drew it all in one line width. So, you know, there's times like that where, as I mentioned before, you don't always want to follow the exact line of the penciler. You want to help out with the shapes and stuff, because just like this part of the jacket where the light hits near the top, the light source is still going to hit the top of this object, so that part's going to appear to be, the line's going to appear to be finer or a broken line, because it's going to have a highlight. So we're going to finish it off here. I'm gonna fade, that's gonna be black, and instead of just making it all solid black for the shape here, I've done a few lines that kind of keep that sketch look, and also create a little bit of highlight within that black, which it breaks up some of the black, so it's not a hard shadow, you know, it breaks it up there a bit. So where the X's are, including where this line is, this will all be black. And you may not be able to notice it right away what is intended there, but I make little notations for myself by placing little dots or X's in the artwork. You know, like all of this is gonna go black and all of that, but it still has, you know, a few broken lines in it. Alright, so for her jacket, I'm going to leave a little bit of space between the holding line and where I fill in all the black, just to kind of create a little bit of a highlight right there. And let's see up here. This should fade in as well. Continue that line. So all this will be in black. And I want to finish this part off here of her jacket. The jacket is over the breast, so it should be thicker than what I previously inked. And my nib is picking up a slight bit of fiber from the Jimmy, but got it off. Otherwise, it makes your line flow too fast off the nib. Makes it just a little harder to control. So trying to throw my lines as quickly as I can in a fairly fast motion to make them smooth on the outside. Alright, just gonna finish off the jacket here. Go a little thicker around where the neck is, and then thinner. And it has a bit of a beveled look there. Well, alright, well, appreciate you guys joining for this video. If you haven't subscribed, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notifications, because the videos are going to be in about a week apart, but I'm not really sure exactly which day of the week I'm going to be uploading them, as I'm working on artwork at the same time. Trying to keep these videos consistent for you, so the more viewers, the more videos that I can make. So spread the word. And don't forget, you can follow me on Twitter. And I'll see you guys in the next video.